All right, so we are here. We're kind of already talking. We got our topic today: transcendence and invincibility.
Yes.
Transcendence and invincibility, and there's probably going to be stuff on money and stuff. But hey, Solara, hey everyone, thanks for joining.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming to play with us and hang out and share this experience with us. And we were playing a little bit before we hopped on, and there was a key concept that was wanting to come through. And this is super relevant to transcendence and invincibility, and also with making wealth. And so one of the insights that came through for me in my journey was you are enabled or allowed to support another user. You're enabled. So you're given the power of quantum universal intelligence. So this is where we're connecting into the field of absolute oneness, which is that transcendental space. So the power of that field is what comes online for us, because I'm no longer operating as, oh, it's just Solara and it's about just me and it's about my life. It's like, no, all of this power comes on when you're willing to utilize it to be of service to humanity in the whole, because we're all one interconnected being. And so we don't actually fully flourish until we're all flourishing. And that's the direction that we're all moving in anyways. But all of that power really starts to come online when we're devoted to serving the I am well in the whole, with flourishing also. And so, and that's also accessible in the field of transcendence. And through that getting outside of ourselves, which is also another key component to flow, we are filled with the power of the universe because we're no longer, quote, in our own way. And then we've got all of this generative power to give and to give and to give, and nothing is more fulfilling than helping serve the source and another being in the way that they need and desire service. And we utilize our unique capacities and abilities and skills in order to do that. But that's ultimately what fills us up. I mean, I can say at this stage in the game for me in my own life, there's absolutely, I mean, of course I enjoy life, and I love like luxury and beauty and just the sensual experience of all of our senses. But helping another being, serving another being, and watching them light up, watching their dreams come true, watching them step into their own power and make the changes that they've wanted to make for a very long time, to feel joy in their heart and their soul. Like literally nothing fills me more than witnessing that. I feel like a proud mama bear. And so, in my experience, that power is given to me and continues to flow powerfully without the interrupts or the ups and the downs and the highs and the lows and all of this, when I stay connected to why I'm here, which is to serve the whole. Like I am a vessel for the whole.
Yeah. I feel an important thing for me that was like a clarification process was around exactly how I wanted to do that and how I didn't want to do that. Because when the work is not in flow and the work is work, it doesn't matter how well the other person's being served. If you're not feeling like your faculties are being utilized in the way that are most empowering to you, then you're going to end up getting drained and you're going to end up not liking it. And so for me, like that discovery process was definitely almost like keeping it away, because I wanted it to be just right until the flow really overtook. And now I can feel like, yeah, that's what I want. Like my faculties being utilized in such a way that it's like at the edge of that challenge, but yet it's easy, but yet it's so fun and playful, and it doesn't feel like work. And like that passion, like you said, there's nothing like that.
Yeah. Oh, that's so juicy and good. And that's like a key component to activating flow too, because we're always going to be ascending in our own mastery. And so that level of challenge is always going to expand as we do. So we'll get mastered in one arena. And one of the things that I always reference if I need to, tap into what my flow is for next stage of my own evolution is the quote, I forget who it is by, but it's, ask not what the world needs, ask what makes you come fully alive, and go do that. Because what the world needs are more people who have come fully alive. And I think that when we're utilizing the fullness of our best capacities, that's when we feel the most alive. Like what, and one of the ways I've reflected on that in my own journey is not only what's really relevant is the synthesis of my capacities here and now in the present moment, but what am I masterful at? Like, what have I spent my lifetime mastering? And if I look upon that, it's in every phase of life, going through mastering health and wellness, going through mastering movement and exercise, going through mastering spiritual connection to source and my deities and the guides and my supernatural networks, going through mastering energetics and how to allow the Tao and direct the Tao powerfully, learning how to master relationships by connecting to the source in all beings, and just going through in business too, getting into the logistical side of things. And it's like, okay, from all those years that I was in corporate and I was managing Fortune 500 companies, what did I learn there? I learned how to be really great at structure and organization and numbers and all of that. And so how can I utilize those skills now to organize things in such a way that the impact of them increases in the world so that I can scale to reach more people? And so all of those capacities come online in different ways, and it's most fulfilling to utilize them all. And I think that that's a pivotal part to this course and this program too, is that yes, it's the mastery and it's the energetics are the foundation of everything. And so once and then we're compelled to motion, then we're inspired to motion, then it's exhilarating to create, and we get to utilize all of those other skills and capacities. And one of the things, and I'm going to go back in and edit the design a bit, but to just bring that forward, is that there's so many, I have in there that we have PDFs and rituals and tools and technologies, but what that looks like is the very real systematic outlay of how to actually take all of that energy and then direct it into form that is highly efficient, highly effective, and produces tangible results that are of highest service to everybody involved in the experience and in the creation of whatever it is that's being asked to be called through. So there's a lot of different tools. And we can go into detail about what those are if you want to, or we can just start dancing in the field of transcendence. And
I had a curiosity come up in what, if any, is the differences, similarities between transcendence and ascension.
Well, ascension implies to me an upward movement. Transcendence to me, I experience as an outward inclusive movement. So I'm taking my energy, I'm getting outside of myself, and I'm embracing the wholeness of what I am as infinity, as the quantum field. And then I'm directing all of that energy to run through my body. But in doing so, I actually elevate the reality around me. So the more that we do that and we get into that flow, the energy starts to vibrate so high, we actually pull physical reality up with us. And that's how we create.
So it's, to me, it would be just a different angle on what beyond really means. Is beyond an outward thing or is beyond an inward thing? Right? Because ascension is upward, but not, if we look at frequency versus physical upwardness versus frequency upwardness, there's a north or above. From a physical dimension standpoint, would be an ascension in physical, but in frequency, we're talking about a totally different axis of our being or of our consciousness. That is a different axis. So beyond or metaphysical, transcendence and ascension, I feel, is we are going outside or beyond the body, but in an energetic sense, we're getting closer to our truth and closer into our grounding of who we actually are.
Well, yeah, because that energy has to run through the body, so it's all interconnection. It's all happening at the same time, and so it's to transcend to me is a massive opening, a release of complete resistance, and an elevation through the portal of the high heart into the higher dimensional octaves. And so we're actually expanding out into greater octaves of awareness. So you can imagine if your perspective or your viewpoint is limited to just you, that's kind of a small vantage point, right? But then you go out and you get into the community view, and then you get into the state and the country, and then the world view, and then you get out into the universal, in the galactic, in the cosmic, in the infinite view, and you can begin to embody yourself as that and see all of these different dimensions of yourself and how the micro mirrors the macro in so many ways, and start to bring that power online. And so the actual ascension is, as we become more expanded in our perception, our awareness, our mind, our intelligence, I would say that mind to me is more of a psychic space than an actual brain space. Mind is all inclusive of the larger network, the quantum field itself. And the more expanded that becomes, the more we're called to create way for that energy to anchor fully into our body. And once we become aware, you can't go back. You can't snap back into this. It would be so deeply uncomfortable. And it's actually the impulse of creation itself. So when people say, I feel a call, I feel a pull, I've got to do this thing, it's actually evolutionary impulse that is guiding us to be embodied and expressed more fully in the truth of what we are. And it just so happens that that energetic within us, our potential, our creative potential, is light intelligence, and light is information. So the more we open up, the more of that light intelligence is released from our DNA into our conscious and ultimately our superconscious mind. We start to see more, perceive more, become aware of more. We're more self-aware on a grand scale, and more aware of subtle nuances and things on the micro scale as well. And we become more harmonized with those greater dimensions of our own being. And then we start to, we embody our future self, embody our quantum self. So there's a lot of different dynamics. And I think that it's exquisite because that portal is accessible instantaneously, and many people experience it as an evolution. So one of the things that I have found extraordinarily useful is to cultivate the space of pure transcendence and invincibility, because we're going there anyways. And if we can actually just go directly to the point, then we save ourselves needing to go through 10, 20, 30 years of evolution. We can get right to it and really start to do what it is that lights us up and ignites and inspires us, and also what we're here to do on a global scale, what we feel uniquely drawn to. So might as well just get in it.
Would you say that transcendence on a consciousness evolution journey, transcendence is really going from a self-conscious state to a self-aware state?
Yes, and a self-embodied state. So walking around as the quantum self. Instead of the self-conscious self. Yeah.
Which is interesting, because we kind of texted about this last night, where I've been kind of, quantum charting my, quantifying my onions peeling of abundance in my life, and the realizations and the new perspectives of it being reflected back to me. And I think in what you were saying about evolutionary leaps or transition shifts taking 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, like the old school look at wisdom being like, you need a lifetime before you can have it. You need the white beard before you have that old school look at it is, when I first stepped foot into self-development, self-evolution, and conscious evolution, you know, it was like, no, I would like all my deathbed realizations right now, so I don't have to, you know, deal with it later. And that accelerates that evolutionary journey into wisdom. And through that, it was like going from, okay, so I really did not feel or quote unquote receive the love that I probably needed growing up. And so there was like a neglect of loving myself, and a lot of self-judgment, self-criticism, to go from there and to go into the spiritual journey, which is about like understanding what the ego is and finding presence and dissolving and transcending the ego and all of the you know, the inferiority, superiority, the comparison, separation, all of the things that the ego thrives and survives on. To go through that and to like depersonalize myself and to remove myself from the equation so that I could feel the essence of myself, to going into abundance and like coming back into my body and figuring out, oh, I'm allowed to have a personality. I'm allowed to be embodied and to like enjoy this experience and not martyr myself away because of the spiritual, you know, spiritual ego or whatever, you know, that kind of paradigm of being super spiritual and like not having emotions and like all of those things that come up when you're learning about transcending the ego, and misconceptions and stuff, and to come back around full circle to actually now receiving love and I'm open to it now, and I'm receiving love and getting all compliments now, and like being seen, and I'm visible, and I'm impacting people and hearing about it, and it's like, oh, now I'm like, my ego's being filled up and fulfilled, but I'm self-aware that I know it's not me, but it's like doesn't change the fact that it feels fucking amazing. And so there's that full circleness and coming back around to what embodied personality and playing with this individuality, what that really means, and having fun with passion, where it can still be real and it can still feel like my experience matters, my definitions, my meaning matters, but on that higher infinite level, it's like I know it's not, and it's not me, and I'm presence, I'm even greater than what my body and things are telling me. And so, that's been really cool to kind of soak in and receive, especially the last few months or weeks, whatever, like, is to finally be able to receive ego fulfillment without getting lost in the separations of it, or the superiority of it, or the inferiority of it, and really have fun with it.
Yeah, and it feels like, well, to me, when I hear you express that, we can call it whatever we want, really, but it feels like soul fulfillment. And in the ego is so interesting. So it's like the space and place and the difference between identifying with an archetype or a personality construct, or thinking that you are ultimately any of the identifications that you have formed in your mind, versus knowing yourself as the true self, as the infinite self, as the quantum self. And so the ego evolves as we evolve. It's how we interface with physical reality. So if you can think of it as, we're in this virtual holographic reality game, the ego is what allows us to be sovereign expressions of source energy and intelligence. And without it, you wouldn't have your unique avatar and I wouldn't have mine. We would just be all one massive field of light, and there would be no distinction. So the ego is what allows us to have distinction and unique characteristics, and all the things that come through us being uniquely, exotically, brilliantly who we are. So it's actually essential for us to be here in this dimension. And when we're connected into our infinite self and our soul, the creative expression that comes through us and our overall expression is much different than when we're operating from, a self-limiting identification with who we think we are, or who we think we need to be, or who we think we're going to be, or any of that. It's just going out into that field of like, who am I really? And plugging into the truth of our higher self. And so then we don't even have to evolve through all those stages of identification, right? Because it's like, there's a lot around like designing yourself and becoming the next level you, but really the becoming the supreme you is what we're speaking into, going directly to who are you and allowing yourself to experience yourself fully through that lens, and that will naturally expand upon itself.
To play the bigger games.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I'll definitely beam questions back to me, but I got another one that's coming up.
Yeah.
Would you say, because we're kind of, transcendence and invincibility, would you say that transcendence is going beyond, but in to like embodiment, right, and full embodiment at the highest power, to be an open vessel for all extremes of boundless emotion, positive and negative, whether like the whole spectrum of the experience is open, because there are no bounds, there are no borders at that point of transcendence and going beyond the limitations. But that invincibility through that self-awareness really is realizing that nothing actually touches that or you. And so that, like, they're the complementary complements of each other within what we're talking about. And like that invincibility really, to me, really flourishes when you can be super clear and not resistant to your own transcendence.
Yes. And seeing the gold and the beauty and the grace in it, and really just harmonizing with whatever's coming up, and finding ecstasy in whatever it is that we're actually experiencing, because we're not resisting it at all. And that allows us to, transcending the rules and the limitations that we've been taught to believe we must operate within, or that we have convinced our own self that we need to operate within. And invincibility is just being so acclimated to that realm and that space that we take it up a notch, and nothing can actually touch our state when we're there. So no matter what waves come through, it's like you're the eagle, right? So you're not rowing in the boat anymore. You're not getting overtaken by the waves. You're soaring. You're literally coming from that larger vantage point, and you're calibrated in that field and that frequency to such a degree, and so aware of its magic and its power and its potency. It's like nothing's taking you down. And so there's resilience that is built, and they're bringing me to, when I say they're my source, my guides, it's it's also, neuroplasticity, continuous neurogenesis into the future. So the mind never stagnates. It's always learning and growing and evolving in a fluid, seamless motion. And so the more we create neuroplasticity and adaptivity in our mind, and we gain cognitive, psychological fitness, the more we can stay in those transcendent, invincible spaces, because we've made a choice that that's where we will stay. And that into itself is a practice and a mastery. And I think that in my own journey, I feel like I oscillate between the two still, but I certainly am. So what I'm anchoring in is that space of invincibility. I'm like, okay, what do I do? And it's like source sports. Can I live in the field of source intelligence and supermind constantly and experience life in that way? So it's a lot of clearing out of our consciousness and our stories, and becoming masterful at adapting in source intelligence from moment to moment to moment to moment, no matter what arises. And so we've got to create that solidity within our own self and our own consciousness and our own mind. And practice it. You know, it's a practice. The mastery happens on the field.
Mm, mm.
And and there's another place in space. So flow. So even the definition of flow is defined as an optimal state of consciousness where we feel our best and perform our best. So in the definition, it gives us the order in which flow unfolds itself, an optimal state of consciousness. And so what is the optimal state of consciousness? And so a first dimension of that is becoming exquisitely intimate with source, our higher self, our collective genius, God, however we plug into that energy, and in knowing it and understanding it, because that's the highest evolved expression of who and what we all are. And it's always continuing to expand upon itself, but there's core laws that are not mutable.
Yeah.
And so understanding that intelligence, being intimate with it, and allowing ourselves to cultivate and integrate and really anchor it into the body, so that as we show up to life in the moment, we can be that fully and express in that way and hold life in that way. And everything from that point of awareness and perception and worldview, the way we're looking at ourselves and the way that we're looking at others in our environment, everything in our reality adapts to that consciousness, meaning everything else transmutes in our presence. It's ultimate magic, it's ultimate power. And so why not, and so that becomes the practice. Like, nothing's going to take me out of the space because I know the magnificence and the power of it. And, in some of the more magical texts and things, and this was something that found me after a great initiation when I was mastering, the law of one, was something called the great work. And what they say is that it's the mastery of a man and all of it's the supreme mastery of man and all of his faculties, unification with the self and unification with the all. And from that embodiment of the field itself, we gain great, one, great responsibility to maintain it and to transmit it and to guide others safely and joyously into that space. And also, when we're in that embodiment, we become highly influential with our energetics, no matter what we're doing and no matter where we are. So we have a responsibility to maintain and cultivate that field ever more deeply because of the potency that it carries throughout the collective field. So it adds a different dose of potency. And so staying anchored into it is a primary, what do I have to do to stay here?
Can you define maintenance?
Mm-hmm.
Because I in the unphilosophy way that I grok presence and non-identification with the state of personhood, it almost the high standard or the high sensitivity that I aim, or that is aimed through that is that there is nothing to maintain.
If you're anchored into your knowing, that's absolutely correct. And so for me, the maintenance comes when we're still regenerating psychosomatically, viscerally, at a cellular level, all of the patterns and programs that are in opposition to or in discord with that light, that frequency, that intelligence within us that does know. So that's such an individual thing. The goal, I would say, would be to know, right, consistently. But I feel like both are happening on some level simultaneously. I mean, they're happening simultaneously.
How do you? I was discussing this today. How does one get out of their own way?
Beautiful. Well, the first step to that, especially if we've been in our own way, and in our own head mostly is how that translates, is chill, take a breather, surrender, and allow yourself to receive first and foremost. So going into the place and space of absolute trust, which always graduates into a knowing, which always graduates into certainty and beingness and havingness and all of that. But the first step I would say is to release, all the resistance, all the ways that we're trying to control our reality, not trusting fully and knowing fully that we are the whole thing. We are the whole game. We are it. We have it. We're not separate from it. We're whole and we're complete. So releasing our own resistance around being whole in the here and now. And being in the havingness. And so there's plenty of energetic exercises to go through for that. But what I would recommend just on a base fundamental level is whatever supports you with going into deep, deep visceral states of relaxation, coursing the breath through the body, focusing on the breath to get the energy circulating, but from a really relaxed space. And if you can do transcendental meditation, in the space of transcendental meditation, the mind actually regenerates itself. So any patterns or programs that we have constructed that are inhibiting us or limiting us in any way, just through the act of transcendental meditation, will start to naturally regenerate into new neural synapses, new neural pathways, all of this, so that we can have heightened intelligence and consciousness come through. So that's the ease of it too. We just have to let go.
And you know what, like the supporter of that is a space. And that's exactly like why we're doing what we're doing, is because, beyond techniques, tools, guidance, like all of that, what really I feel empowers it is just to have the space in order to feel it. The safe, allowing, nurturing, nourishing space that just, to me, it's if you look at virtual space container, like you're entering a house or a room, like this is the pristine, clean, OCD, like container that really fosters all of this at an accelerated pace.
Yes. Thank you for bringing that forward. That's such a huge piece. It's I've spoken into this before, but every single day I clean my space, no matter what, in some form or capacity, clear the air. If I have singing bowls accessible, which I do now, because I'm finally officially, everybody's plugging in. I'm finally moved into my new home. I'm so thankful my sacred, powerful, feminine, and inner king have a place to land and cultivate creativity.
We should preface that creativity is messy. That creativity is allowed to be messy. I have to tell that to myself.
Yeah. Or just like organic. I feel like wild and uninhibited and organic. Like, yes. But the energy itself is so pristine that we actually have to cultivate a pristine container within our physical vessel, and also within our environment, and also within our relationships, and all the different ways that we plug into energy. So if we can think of reality as code, and everything is code, and our environment is continuously informing us, like, do I want to be informed by my environment? Yes. I love my environment. So select, and do I want to be informed by these relationships? Yes or no. I love that. And so making those choices around how we actually want to code ourselves and our reality. Same with our food. Our food informs our body. Do I want to be being informed with this? Yes or no? And making adjustments that align to what our unique needs are. And keeping that space open and staying connected to our breath. Those are just, those two things alone would work wonders. Do work wonders, will work wonders.
Got anything for me? I need my human design empowered here.
Yeah.
To respond.
So what would you consider to be, so how would you define transcendence and invincibility, and what are the core diversities amongst them from
Mm.
your perspective? And what is the ultimate gift of each of them as well?
Mm.
So what are they? Distinctions, gifts.
Transcendence from transcendence from my skeptical sword is the journey of the traversal and the journey of frequency upliftment to where consciousness observes dimensional views from 3D, 4D, 5D. That to me is transcendence. And I know that these are now marketing buzzwords. 5D, it's become a thing. But when I was first really trying to understand the mechanics of what I was feeling and seeing vision-wise, 3D and 4D are very much in our collective consciousness, very mixed and very entangled. And so the disentangling process was like a first phase there, with understanding the difference between 3D and 4D. And then to go from the box of 4D of linear boxed time and limitation to mind versus imagination, where 4D becomes 5D and form becomes quantum. That to me is transcendence, because you're going from a state of person, body, self-conscious identity to presence and the quantum self in a self-aware capacity that keeps you grounded. If you, for example, take a drug and you go straight to 5D and the infinite imagination, infinite doors of perception, and you don't have the understanding of like 3D, 4D first, of like where your feet are actually touching the earth, then you get lost up there, and or mental illness and all of that stuff becomes the reality, because you're going up into these higher dimensions, higher octaves, as you put it, higher power, energetic power and frequency, but the body is not processing that energy efficiently.
Yes.
And you're bottlenecking your energy at that funnel up, and the circulation is not working correctly. The imagination technology is not circulating the energy. So transcendence to me is having that foundation so that you can fly in the higher frequencies, higher consciousness, with precision, with a precision of the machine. The technology has been upgraded. The operating system, the hardware, the software, however you want to metaphor the flow of energy, is stable enough so that your human body, your human consciousness doesn't get overloaded and fry. Your chips don't fry by all that light. Because it's a lot of fucking light when you enter those things. And if you're taking personality with you, it's going to fry you. It's going to fry you.
It'll drain the system, and it'll get stuck and trapped and create, absolutely. The molecular integrity has to be upgraded.
So that's transcendence, and invincibility. Oof. I forgot who I was talking to, but I brought up the word distinction between invisibility and
so good.
Because they mean something slightly different. In terms of like invisibility is like you can't see me, and invincibility is like you can't touch me.
Transparency.
Transparency. And I've always like my sole theme was going from being kind of invisible to being visible. Like I was like, I felt invisible growing up. Like no one saw me. Like I didn't feel seen. And at a certain point, like I empowered that. Like that became something of an identification.
Mm-hmm.
Being under the radar, not being seen, like not being noticed, and kind of liking it. And so that invisibility was something that was a superpower of mine, of not being seen, until I realized, okay, there's a soul theme of like an evolution of like, oh no, I do want to be seen, and how do I become visible was there. But when I look back in hindsight at the mechanics involved here, the training that I received from being invisible growing up and using that as a superpower to practice, and to enhance, become better at, like how invisible could I really be in a group of people, and like actually not being seen by choosing it. And I'm pretty damn good at it. Not to, and there, but now coming into invincibility and trying to understand what that means, they're very similar, because it is transparency is like, that's the perfect word, because the more that you are evolving into this quantum self, which is simultaneously infinite in magnitude, but also in finite in nothingness and emptiness. Like we're going into the atom, we're going into light at its smallest scale, which is the everything and the nothing at the same time. So it's both.
Yeah.
And so that transparency is really that practice that we talked about earlier of how much can I take my personality out of the equation? How much can I take me out of the equation to be fully transparent? That's invincibility.
Yeah.
Because then you realize that the me, the person that you're defending, or the masks that you're wearing that you think are your identity, they're not there anymore. And so there's nothing can touch you, because you're not the body, you're not the mind, and you're not your thoughts. And so everything in that range is what, the energy in this dimension is. So it's someone's words, which is just meaning, definitions, energy. It's someone punching your face, which has pain, but it's not really touching you. To what is the biggest invincibility of just the whole identity itself? I mean, how big do we want to go with like what invincibility actually means? So yeah. I hope that's amazing.
Yeah, you're just absolutely ingenious. So thank you. Yeah, it's what I'm feeling, just to tap into that space of invincibility. Well, what I see actually at a quantum level is, you can imagine all of the atoms and the quarks inside of our cells, our cell nucleus, our cell membrane, all of this, the ways that energy actually circulates through our cells, becoming so clear and clean and pristine that the energy is moving through us in such a way that even our physical structure becomes totally malleable. So the light starts to be able to move through, quote, at electric speed. That's what we're accelerating into. But as the light comes in, it starts to remove the density, personality structures, because that's what creates the density. And the more that we can allow that free energy to come through, so it's electric, and it's a lot like a breeze too. So you can imagine like cool air, just flowing. That's what that space really starts to feel like. It's like a breeze, and everything's malleable, and you're moving through life. And I won't get into it now, it's part of my flow training course, but it's some of the scientific aspects around what the brain is actually doing in a flow state. And so all of these higher cognitive function, executive function, all of these things, our sense of will and morality and all of this. And if you've ever heard Stephen Kotler, Jamie Wheel speak into this, and this is based off of another profound scientist. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, so yeah. It's on my site. You can go explore it there. But in these states, the part of our brain that most of us use in our daily waking lives to live life, to accomplish, to create, to make complex decisions and all of this actually deactivates entirely. And so gamma waves, and this is something that I'm super fascinated by. And this is a little research that I would say it discovered me. Some part of me was looking for it.
Yeah.
Is that it transcends gamma waves, which is a flow state, states of peak performance, achieving the seemingly as well supernatural and unimaginable and miraculous, and spiritual emergence takes place, altruism, unconditional love, all these higher states of being. Dopamine is going off, anandamide, which is the bliss molecule. All of these neurochemicals are actually running through our brain, but the gamma brain wave, or the gamma wave state, actually transcends the human brain entirely. So we're not utilizing the faculties of the brain, which suggests, and I don't hear this spoken into often, is that intelligence is transcendent of the brain. And there's so much work that we try to do to become intimate with the brain itself, which is profoundly supportive. And
in other words, you're saying brain 3D.
Right. So I'm talking about the quantum supernatural network of mind itself, supermind. And so what we're tapping into is a psychic visionary intelligence that has a view that is so far reaching, far beyond the mind. So if we can train that state, and then in that state, we can become totally transparent, because we're not concerned anymore with conceptual rules. We're more inclined to creatively express ourselves and trust the flow of that genius and that intelligence than to cave way to. Yeah.
Whew. That jolted me, that what you just said. Yeah. I will always be sharing this metaphor because it's my favorite metaphor for this, or flow. And it really helps when we talk about cleanliness and everything that we're talking about is purity.
Mm-hmm.
Purity. It's not what the human thinks it is. And that's like, yes, we can empower, we can really foster cleaner states by cleaning our environment and having all of that. I'm not saying like don't do that. If that calls to you, do that, and it feels good. Yes, it feels good. But that's not what purity is. The purity is akin to the Wonka River, because if you listen to the metaphor of that movie, or interpret it like I do really extremely, is the Wonka River is pure until human hands are touching it. And that's the same with the fifth dimensional quantum supermind as the imagination, is that the flow is going from that infinite down to our finite 3D bodies. And if we can understand, the mastery is when our human hands are in that stream. That's what makes it impure, quote unquote, impure. And when we take the human hands out, then the stream is pure, and that becomes the flow state and all of that brilliance.
Exactly what I was just thinking. Thank you. You are profound. That's really a beautiful metaphor for allowing and getting out of our own way. Some of those questions that we were tapping into earlier. And another word that wants to come through also is quality, like the quality of data that we introduce to our experience.
The best chocolate.
Only the best chocolate. And where am I selecting anything that is not akin to that? And so making those adjustments, and that's where we talked about wiping the slate clean and continuously doing that for ourselves. And raising the quality of energy and consciousness on the planet at large, and therefore our quality of life and capacity to thrive.
Yes. So we have a bunch of comments that we're rolling through in our flow there.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for commenting. I hope we won't be able to get to everyone. My design type is generator to respond with a sacral authority, and apparently I have a lot of open centers, which is rare or something like that. What do you know yours off yours top of your head? Your human design type?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I don't know if you were speaking with her. I'm a pure generator, so I'm designed to generate abundance, energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Sean says, what I'm starting to see is the effects these higher level 4D, 5D levels of consciousness are transcending into the 3D through the 4D with the help of the 5D.
So let me speak into dimensions for a minute, because again, it's one of those things that's ultimately infinite. But as we go through the third and the fourth and the fifth, and then we get into the sixth, which is the space of the open ascended heart. So we're experiencing ourself through everything, truly in that miraculous state. These dimensions are actually ultimately infinite, but at these higher dimensional octaves, like the fourth and the fifth, we, as Ken Wilber would say, we transcend and include, which is exactly what happens. So these other octaves are informing us, and if we're to look at it in a linear fashion like this, and then as we are elevating also to meet them simultaneously, we transcend the previous dimension, but we include all of its intelligence and its wisdom, but then the energy operates differently on the new plane. So we get to release a lot of it's still there and it's still present and it's still in our database as wisdom and knowledge and intelligence, but we start operating at a new level of expression, and also our manifestation capacities change also. Like they become potent, profound, instant, all of this, because we're in a different, it's like if you observe the Newtonian reality next to the quantum reality, the rules are completely different. Yeah, so it's a beautiful awareness.
Yeah. We have one question here. Rajat, hey Rajat. Can one alter their genetic codes in the state of ultimate consciousness? Great question. Great question. Do you want to take it first?
Yes, absolutely. And I would say that in the state of ultimate consciousness, that genetic transmutation happens much more rapidly and coherently. Yes, in that state, we're existing as it already, whole and complete, but in this body that is evolving and ascending and transcending and all of this, depending on what we're uniquely selecting. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. What I would recommend for this, because it really helped me understand the what I did is I did it backwards, like most things in my life. But a thing called gene keys. You're familiar with gene keys, right?
Yeah.
So I'm by no means an expert at gene keys, but what it helped me grasp is looking at the genome, the genes, in connection with the. It's a synthesis with a lot of different astrology and what's the Chinese
Qigong.
Qigong, right?
Or wait, no, that's hilarious. I have a little qigong thing sitting out here right now. Well, I think the Kabbalah is a part of it.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's I know I can see it in my mind's eye, but
the circle of all of the different things that are connected with the genes.
Right.
So when you understand the gene keys,
let me look that up real quick.
That each aspect of our I Ching. Thank you, Kale. Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Kale. So to understand that each of these gene codons contain a shadow frequency a gift frequency and a city or a superhero frequency, and then you see what all of them are. Like, I was a weirdo, and I read the dictionary of it before actually seeing my own. So you understand that. And how many are there? 42? No, there's an. I should know. There's a all. How many gene keys are there? Do you know?
I think there are 64, but you might want to double check that.
64. You're right.
Okay.
So each of these things have a shadow, have a gift, and have a superpower. And when you like see all of them together, and you see what traits and personality and things that they're connected to, and you see the journey that each of them are, and then when you're actually doing it right, and you look at your own gene key chart, you can see what your gene key's soul dynamic is, and you can alter your genetic code from that view of looking at the genes in that way. So gene keys are really powerful, and it's a deep rabbit holes of information that you can go through, and yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, it's so fun. Actually, that has been coming through for the past couple of days to just briefly speak into. And first, I'm curious what your pearl is. Do you know?
Oh man, let me see if I have this on my.
Yeah, and Raj, if you want to look yours up, if you just go to genekeys.com, it'll pop up the free profile so that you can look at your own chart and discover, you know, what your evolution, your life's work and purpose are, what your how you function best in culture, what your pearl is, higher purpose, all of that.
So here's mine. I have beautiful. So pearl again. Pearl is the middle one, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So justice. No, wait. What? How do you?
Does it say underneath if it's the pearl or next to it? It should be one of the top two in this, not the very top.
Yeah, it's innocence. So
of course it is. That's awesome.
My pearl is, so you can see here, the shadow is chaos, the gift is innovation, and the superpower is innocence.
Yeah.
And so depending on your birth date and time and place, you're going to have a different pearl. And what this represents is you start with your purpose. The purpose leads to your radiance. The radiance leads to the evolution. Evolution leads to life's work. Life's work goes to vocation, culture, and pearl. Like that. And so you understand yourself from a really, really cool way.
Mm-hmm. Your evolution.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That has been a potent support for me, anchoring into, you know, my own design and the ways in which I feel fully anchored into and connected to my own soul, in the way that I interact and engage and dance with life and community and culture and relationships and all of that, and what is really valuable and important to me in those areas and what I'm called to cultivate. So it's a profoundly supportive tool.
Yeah. About an hour, so maybe this will be the last question, because we're going to be back tomorrow too.
Best question ever. Go ahead.
What do you think about virtual reality? You think it will hinder the journey of a person's true state, or do you think it will deceive or hinder a person from knowing his true self? You're welcome, Rajat. Let me field this one. Although I think you have something, you're bursting. So go ahead. I'll
let you go first. I'll hold the space and I'll let you transmit.
Okay. Like any tool or technology, it can be used mindfully or it can be used mindlessly. And virtual reality is no different to me. I think if the intent is to use virtual reality to evolve, to transcend, to experience higher states, then it will give you that experience. And if you're using virtual reality to escape, it will let you escape and get out of it. And so yeah, like any tool, technology, drug, medicine, like it's what the intent you put into it is what you will receive exponentially.
Beautiful. Exactly. And the purpose of why.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So that's hilarious. I immediately tapped into reality as virtual reality. So I wasn't even thinking on the level of like an actual virtual reality getting in the, but you put me back in that space. That was beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think that exactly everything that Jeremy said, precisely. And on a larger scale, I think that understanding the mechanics of our virtual reality, our holographic reality, are exactly what we need to support our transcendence and invincibility and the embodiment of those codes and that blueprint and the fusion with it. And then we open into the magic and the continual unfolding expansion of our superhuman powers and capacities, all of this. So I think that that's actually essential for us to thrive, is to connect into those realities.
They're in the quantum parallel possibilities, either or, neither nor, and both. I explained this to someone to kind of explain and not rationalize, but like give that higher perspective that the things that we think we can't really accept about the planet or evil or all like the darkness and all of that, I like to look at it like, life is real, the universe is real, and then also have the parallel perception, like the simulation theory, that it could be simulation and virtual reality as well. Because what that does for me is it does honor the sacredness of reality and realness, but also gives the food and the understanding to look at individuality and the ability for someone to choose evil and to choose like the evil things that are happening from the perspective that it is a virtual reality too. Like you can choose anything. And that to me, like when you can balance those two things, to see the virtual reality simulation, but also to see the reality and the realness of physical experience, it gives you that balancing, a balance point to understand oneness and inclusiveness of everything, light and dark, from a balanced place.
Yeah, beautiful. The yin and the yang. And that's just quite literally how when we transcend, that's what happens. It shifts the little dot of
All right. Thank you, everyone, for the comments. Kale says, great stuff.
We love you guys. Thank you so much for just being here and sharing. Sharing family time.
Possibilities are possible.
Yes.
Awesome, guys. So we plan on being back tomorrow to flow and dance our hearts out. And thank you again. Much love for tuning in. If you're catching the replay, let us know as well.
Yeah, love you. Mwah.
Bye, everyone.